Hello, I'm David Breeden. I'm the Senior Minister at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and this is Coffee and Wisdom, when we talk about where liberal religion and humanism have come from, where we are today, and maybe where we're going. This week we have been talking about humanism and the human condition, and considering the idea of conscience within the tradition of liberal religion and then specifically humanism. Individual conscience becomes critical to some of the Protestant Reformation folk. That's really the first time this had been talked about. Before it was in the Roman Catholic hierarchy of Western Europe, it was pretty well, if you are in this geographic area, by golly, you are Roman Catholic. If you don't talk too loudly, everything's okay, but just, keep it quiet or you will suffer the consequences. Well, with the Protestant Reformation in the 1600s, suddenly these Protestant ideas begin to pop up everywhere. And as a matter of fact, we say that there was a Reformation with people like Luther, and then a radical Reformation, which is the one that the Unitarian ideas come out of. And part of this is something that nobody has heard of today pretty well, but it was very important in its day. And that is the Rakowian Catechism of 1605. From Krakow, Poland, and it was translated from Latin into several European languages of the day. I want to read a little bit out of it for you. And I don't really recommend, spending a lot of time reading this, that it's talking about a lot of abstruse theological points that no one really cares about anymore. But this is what they had to say to set this up. It was not without reason that Hilary, Bishop of Poitiers, heavily complained of old that after the Council of Nicaea, nothing was written but creeds, and these indeed annually and monthly, by which he observes one after another, we are bitten until we are almost devoured. So all of these creeds, all of these dogmas are come pouring out all the time at us, and we don't have any choice but to listen, and that is not good. He goes on. It is not without just cause that many pious and learned men complain at present also that the confessions and catechisms, which are now put forth and published by different Christian churches, are hardly anything else than apples of Eris, meaning discord, trumpets of discord, ensigns of immortal enmities and factions among men. The reason of this is that those confessions and catechisms are proposed in such a manner that the conscience is bound by them. That's where conscience comes in. The conscience, my actual mind, my way of thinking, is actually bound by all of this material that is pouring out. That a yoke is imposed upon Christians to swear to the words and opinions of men. Notice this, and this is very important as it goes forward into a Puritan idea, that it is the words and opinions of men, not the word of God, which the Puritans want to be following here, and that they are established as a rule of faith from which everyone who deviates in the least is immediately assailed by the thunderbolt of an anathema, is treated as a heretic, as a most vile and mischievous person, is excluded from heaven, consigned to hell, and doomed to be tormented with infernal fires. Well, how did they feel about that, right? So all of this stuff that's coming out, all these creeds and dogmas are coming out, and we want to center on the actual word of God, what Luther was calling sola scriptura. We only want to read the Bible. We don't want to hear about all these papal proclamations pouring in. By the way, this is the building in Krakow, still exists, that was the Polish Brethren Church from which this catechism comes, that congregation. And interestingly enough, yes, it still exists, and nowadays it is a Quaker meeting house because the Unitarians were run out at very short order after this. Okay, a little bit more of this. This is the Rakowian Catechism. Far be from us this disposition, or rather this madness. Whilst we compose a catechism, we prescribe nothing to any man. Whilst we declare our own opinions, we oppress no one. Let every person enjoy the freedom of his own judgment in religion. Only let it be permitted to us also to exhibit our view of divine things without injuring and calumniating others. So you see, just let us be. Stop sending the creeds our way. Stop making us say these things openly in church because we don't agree. All we're asking for is to have our freedom of conscience and our way of worshiping. Please. Now, that sounds like a small thing, but the British Parliament voted to seize and burn all copies of the Racovian Catechism in 1652. It first came in Latin, and of course, church people in those days could read Latin, and it was very quickly translated into English and burned by order of Parliament. And it was outlawed in Poland, where it had been published in 1656. All right, so why do we even bother, interesting historical footnote, right? Well, actually, it was very important. So what? So the Westminster Confession of Faith of 1646 was a Puritan document in England that established a Presbyterian form of church governance. I talked about this last week. That is that there are hierarchical levels and the congregation is down at the bottom and has to listen to these levels. You can see why that would be offensive to the people who believe in the Racovian Catechism, right? Well, this Westminster Confession was written by Puritans in England when they were in power. And this is a painting not from the time period. The assertion of liberty of conscience by the independents, that's the Westminster Assembly of Divines. So what they did is from every county of England, they had two prominent Puritan ministers come to Westminster Abbey in London to talk about this Westminster Confession. And the dissenters would not agree to sign this, all right? All right, are you with me so far? I know it's a little bit of a plot, but there you go. The Congregationalists who objected to the Westminster Confession, which sets up a Presbyterian form of Puritan government, okay? The Congregationalists, those who wish to have each congregation free, no hierarchy, they objected to this, and thus began the great migration of Puritans to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. That was from about 1630 until about 1640, 42, along in there. These Puritans were coming to Massachusetts, and as I've mentioned before, one of the arguments for why they didn't set up large forms of government here is that they were planning to go back. They thought that the Puritans would win the Civil War and would take over England. That didn't happen, and in 1660, of course, those of you who know your Brit history, the monarchy returns and the Puritans are out of power forever. All right, so yeah, the rest of the story. So the Westminster Confession, of course, goes away except in the Presbyterian areas of Scotland and Ireland. And the British Parliament passes the Act of Uniformity in 1662, that's after the Restoration, declaring the rights of the Church of England the only legal rights. All other traditions were nonconformist and independents. And they still use the term nonconformist in England today. And Unitarians who live there today are nonconformists. The term Unitarian appears in English print first time in 1687. So you see how this is flowing from this idea of independence, this idea of conscience is flowing in. And then the first Unitarian congregation that calls itself Unitarian is King's Chapel, Boston, established in 1686, but it declares itself Unitarian in 1782, right after the American Revolution. You can go there today. That's the building. It is on the Freedom Walk in downtown Boston. And it's a very interesting little church to see because of certainly because of the history that's in it. And also there's a great graveyard, Puritan graveyard over there back on these trees that is great fun to see. So you see how this happens is this idea of conscience flows out of the radical Reformation. It travels across Europe, and specifically in England, it gets shut down by the monarchy. And the Puritans can't essentially go home from Massachusetts. And so thus is born some other ideas that are going to come into American government over time. So yeah, there is actually a genealogy of these ideas, and the freedom of conscience is definitely one of the things that drove all of this history to occur. Join us tonight for the Den of Conversation on YouTube. You can look that up. You can find us on our Facebook page as well. Find the link. Bibles and Beer, a humanist Bible study. Tonight I will be doing a little bit of an introduction to the Gospels, the 4 Gospels that are canonical, and also looking at the first chapter of the book of Mark, which is the earliest of the Gospels, even though it's not the first in the New Testament as Christians have it nowadays. So find yourself a beer with a theological theme, and join us tonight at 7 p.m. Central Time. You can find lots of stuff about humanist Unitarian Universalism on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can help us keep the voice of Unitarian Universalist humanism strong by going to PayPal or firstunitarian.org/donate. Thanks a lot, and we'll be back to talk more about conscience and humanism tomorrow. Thank you.